Welcome to episode number 2 of Countercurrents, where we're trying to interview some of the most interesting, thoughtful, intelligent people around the world. And I am delighted today that we can start off with my new friend, Zeinab Saffar. We met in Moscow 6 months ago and struck up an instant friendship, I would say, the kindred spirits. And so,
Yes.
Zeinab, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. So, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to be with you. It's a great honor to join your much followed and elitist platform. It's very good, just to explain things that might not be accessible due to many factors to whoever follows you and listens to what your platform says.
Well, thank you so much. So let's start sort of at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get to become a journalist in the position that you are in Lebanon? I mean, did you grew up in Lebanon, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
I lived all my life in Lebanon, actually, Larry, and I studied here. I'm an Iraqi-born Lebanese, as I grew, as you said, here in Lebanon. I lived in the Bekaa region, which is in the east of the country, on the border, so somehow to Syria. And I became an academic. And part of my academia is also related to journalism. So I started working for a local media outlet here in Lebanon, Al Manar TV, you must know about.
yes,
I worked there for 8 years. And then I stopped for a maternity leave. And then after the maternity leave, I started with Al Mayadeen TV.
oh, that's
and I'm
great.
still with Al Mayadeen TV.
So how many children do you have?
I have a boy, Amir
A boy.
Ali.
Oh,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
How old
Yes.
is he?
He's
Is he-
13 years old, but now he's in the south of the country. Amir Ali's grandparents, his father is from a village which is just on the border with the occupied territories.
Oh boy.
And it is almost totally devastated by the Israelis, by the Israeli raids and attacks and strikes and bombardments. So he said that I want to go to visit my grandparents and my aunts, and they were displaced to another town in the south also. Believe me, I was not afraid of him going there. He's my only child, but he called me and he said, "Now, Mom, we're having a lot of Israeli raids against our town where he is now."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Are you afraid?" He said, "No, of course not. We are Southerners. They don't understand. We are resistance. We are people who belong to this land. We will defend it." And he's just 13 years old.
Yeah.
And he's listening to these to these attacks, to these raids, to the breach of the sound barrier, and he's okay with it. And I told him, "Do you want me to come and collect you, get you back home?" He said, "No, I want to stay there. Everyone is, displaced, and I'm one of them. And I fully support what my people do there." So this is what you instill in your children. This is how you raise them to love their land, to be attached to their land, to defend their land, to sacrifice for their land. This is, the notion of martyrdom is something that no one can understand and comprehend except the people of the land, not the pirates of the land,
Right.
the people of the land.
Well, so, I mean, you've grown up. How many moments of peace have you known in your lifetime?
Being where we live
Yeah,
geographically in West Asia, I'm Iraqi and Lebanese. Well, not so much according to our age, because our age started with civil wars and occupations, and the Israelis were always here around and kicked out, and then they came in 2006, and now for almost 9 months they're here too. Not here physically, but their air jets and the raids and targeting. So not so many times of peace, but Larry, it is a matter of, it's so peaceful to know that there are people defending you. There are people having your six. There are people having your back. There are people whom you can lean on when an enemy as ferocious as so-called invincible, with a so-called invincible army like the Israelis, you know that there are the men of God, what we term as the men of God in relevance to a verse in the Quran. Those people are defending us. So it is peaceful. And here, is the thing that I wanted to, you asked me off the record that how are you living these days, and everyone is talking about an escalation and a war and a blown up war and an all out war. Despite all these threats and warning of this sort of monstrous war, and despite all the statements perhaps by the Arab and Western embassies for their citizens to leave at once, and for those who are planning to come to Lebanon not to go there at all, despite of the fact that there are 10,000 homes totally destroyed in South Lebanon, not to mention those that are partially destroyed, tens of thousands of people who are displaced, and the loss of human life. Yes, we call them martyrs who have ascended, but they are dear ones to us. Allow me to just give you another image of how the situation is today in Lebanon and why it matters for you to understand that. And by you, I mean the people who listen and follow you, of course. Just recently, a couple of days ago, the high school students, particularly those who were sitting for their exams in the south of the country, where the war is running aggressively and the raids nonstop, particularly in the last couple of days, they sat for their standardized exams, despite being under fire, under raids, as I said, displacement, very hot weather conditions, power outage, which we are used to. We don't have electricity in Lebanon, of course. Yet they sat for the exams. And it is a clear demonstration that despite whatever is going on and the war, there is a definite, steady belief and steadfastness, what we call sumud, and an unwavering support for the resistance. This is very important. As I told you about my child, Amir, the same goes for those also students. They sat for the exams and everything was all right, despite of everything. Also, recently, a $4.5 million restaurant just opened its doors in the heart of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. I hope you come to Lebanon, Larry. I will take you to this restaurant. Imagine that a $4.5 million restaurant now at this very moment, this very big investment, particularly now with everything going on and the economic situation and the war, they opened their doors. This demonstrates a very important also message and image that we trust our money in this country, even if there is a war and an Israeli heinous, insidious aggression against Lebanon going on. Why? You ask yourself, why would those people come and, waste, if you want to look at it like that, $4.5 million in this war-torn country? No, because they believe that the resistance would help them stand strongly in face of the Israeli enemy, because the resistance is defending them.
Right.
Only last month, Larry, 400,000 passengers, expatriates and otherwise, they have arrived into Lebanon, despite the calls for many people, many foreigners to leave the country by their embassies. They have arrived into Beirut through the only airport, which is Rafiq al-Hariri International Airport. And despite all the accusations, I believe you had a look about the the British Daily Telegraph article that talked about Hezbollah stashing and stockpiling missiles in the airport.
Well, you realize how old that story is?
Mm-hmm.
I think that story is probably older than you. So I know back in the 1980s, talking about how Hezbollah controlled the airport, so it becomes a convenient, I'm not saying there is no Hezbollah presence there, but it's like it gets surfaced now as an excuse because, it's a way to try to paint a meme in the West. Let me just go back to a couple of things. A $4.5 million restaurant. What are they serving? Golden crusted salmon?
No, of course, it's a fine dine restaurant, and of course, the decoration and all the things and making it, and the downtown area, it's also a very expensive, luxurious area, so it has to be equivalent in standard to this kind of area. But to come and make such kind of investment at this particular point in time and history, this raises a lot of questions. That who's behind you guys?
Well, yeah, no, well,
what are you? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they're not necessarily thinking as conventional investors being scared off by the unrest, but it also suggests that they have a commitment to the country because, Beirut used to be known really as the jewel of the Middle East.
Sure.
Up until.
It is still.
Yeah.
Today, Larry, as we are speaking, many concerts, many festivities are taking place and are scheduled during the summer with Arab and international artists. Many art exhibitions, many parties, beach parties. The beaches are fully occupied. The chalets all over Lebanon, even in the south where no bombardment is taking place, they are totally and fully booked. And this demonstrates, if it gives any message that, yes, there is a war in the south of the country, but elsewhere in Lebanon, the situation is just normal. If you ask yourself why, this goes back to the strong resistance and the Secretary of General's equation set at the beginning. If you expand operations, we shall expand also operations of the resistance into the depth of the occupied territories. So this was a kind of deterrence.
Well, and one other thing I wanted to go back to, because you mentioned you were raised in the Bekaa Valley, right?
Yes.
Do you have any memory? Because you remember it was 1983, and you may not remember. You may have been such a small little child, and I'm not sure you were born yet.
Yes.
But in 83, the United States was shelling. This destroyers were putting shells into the middle of the Bekaa Valley, which was one of the reasons there was a subsequent attack on the U.S. Marines. Because a lot of time in the U.S., what I call the U.S. mythology, we like to present ourselves as, there we were minding our own business, not doing anything to anybody, and all of a sudden these people attacked us without understanding, well, wait a second, folks. You were dropping these big, shells into the middle of villages. You're killing women and children and, and then you wonder why some of the Lebanese were upset with you. Does your family have, or you have any vivid memories of that period?
Of course, if we don't have vivid memories, we read about them or we hear the stories of the people who were actually there, who have experienced what was happening. The American administrations, the successive administrations, the moment they set foot in our part of the world, particularly in Lebanon, also in Iraq and elsewhere, it is actually still a bloody history.
Yeah.
They have this arrogance and this chutzpah of, I'm the strongest power in the world. I'm the one and the only, and I have the right to set the values, to tell you what democracy is, to teach you the norms and the values of being good human beings. What is good human beings? It is to be defined by the Americans themselves and not by us, the people, the owner of the lands, the people who have civilizations. The Mesopotamia, it's the oldest and the eldest culture and civilization in the whole world. And you have in Syria also the cradle of Christianity is there in Syria. In the very same town and city, Ma'lula, that was liberated and freed from the Daesh, from the ISIS.
Right.
It was liberated by Hezbollah. And I don't know why people can't see these things. So if you're asking me about, yes, how would we ever accept others coming from across the oceans to our country and bombing us and trying to teach us what democracy is?
Yeah.
So when a group of people, they just face this, they counter this, they resist, they stand up high to say that, well, you can't play anymore in my country. They say, well, those people have blood on their hands. What do you want us to do? To open our arms and homes and say, welcome and come and occupy us? It doesn't work like that. And this is the US of A, Larry, the administrations, and I don't mean the people. I'm not against the people. I'm against Zionism. I'm not against Judaism. This is to be, we have to drive a line and try to understand this. They come here and they impose their set of what they term and believe as values. And this is totally wrong. It shouldn't be like that. People have the right here in this country to self-determination. And they come to grips with the fact that, and we all know that the Americans, they don't understand except the language of strength, of power, of force. Today, we know from the envoys coming and going to Lebanon, from the mediation that they are trying to set, whether through Qatar, through Syria, through elsewhere, that they're trying to reach a middle ground with Hezbollah, with the resistance. Who is Hezbollah? Who is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is the Lebanese resistance, and it is a party, part and parcel of the country. It has the highest constituency in Lebanon, the highest preferential vote. It has members of parliament. It has ministers in the government. It is mentioned in the policy statement, part and parcel, that Lebanon has the right to have a resistance because some of its land is still occupied by Israel, and there are continuous air and land violations by the Israelis. This is what the resistance means to us. Those men of God that we term them are our children, our brothers, our fathers.
Well, unfortunately, the average, no, it's all right. The average American really has no understanding. I mean, first of all, the average, you're right. There is a goodness within the American people that you can go, there are some YouTube channels of guys who drive around cities, in the United States, and they look for houses where the lawns are completely unkept, they're overgrown with grass, and they'll get out and they'll cut the grass. They do it all for free. And then a lot of times some other neighbors will come out and help them. So there's sort of, when you see those kinds of videos, you're going, yeah, that's the America I sort of grew up with, that a concept of neighbor helping neighbor. Then at the same time, when you ask them, say, hey, find Lebanon on a map, we thought that was in Pennsylvania. There's a Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and well, where Lebanon, and
there's a small Lebanon restaurant everywhere in the world.
Yeah, and then with no understanding or appreciation for the history, for the people, why they're there. That's just, Hezbollah was created because they hate America. And you go,
no, it's not a matter of hate America.
I'm just telling you how the story develops from our side without anybody stepping back and saying, did America have any responsibility?
Larry, I was raised in the Beqa while I studied at the evangelical school in the Beqa all my life. And I used to go to the chapel. Yes. I'm a devout Muslim, but I go to the chapel. And the first gift that I received was from my English language teacher for my efforts in speaking English. It was a book which is called Jesus the Storyteller.
Uh-huh.
And it is a book that I lost in 2006 when Israel bombed our residential building.
Oh,
Okay. I
Mhm.
lost my home. I lost my books, my history, and everything. So this is how we live in Lebanon. It was an American school, so to say, and we had people, it's a missionary school.
Mhm.
So we have people going and coming from the US of A. They come to us and they teach us and they give us, about the values of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, and so on and so forth. My parents didn't say, well, no, this is not your religion. You shouldn't learn about it. You shouldn't recognize it, blah, 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 blah. No, they said, okay, you can go to the chapel. You can, those are our brothers. We have Christians, we have Jews, we have Muslims, we have everything. We didn't hate the US of A. We still don't hate the
Right.
Americans. No, when you have in the US of A, people like yourself, people like others and friends that I know, there's no time to mention. When you have those university students who stood up high and tall and insistent and said that we are going to give up our academic life, we are going to give up our graduation, we are giving up our job contracts. Why? They asked for a permanent at once ceasefire to end the
Right.
genocide in Gaza against those human beings. Those young students, they represent the ethos of the Americans, the forthcoming leaders, hopefully, of the US of A. So we don't hate them. We don't hate you. We don't hate the US of A. We hate meddling in our own affairs, taking the side of the aggressor and trying to help them, to equip them, to groom them, train them, arm them, support them by every means possible, particularly money-wise and militarily, and support them and clear their backs, whether in the UN or the G7 or elsewhere, in certain kind of resolutions, and also providing impunity for them and tell them go and occupy a land that does not belong to you.
Yeah.
The US of A has collected the Jews literally from 112 countries, and they said they speak 88 languages, imagine. And they said, well, we'll give you everything, we'll support you, and you're going to be the Western democracy in an Arab milieu. In an Arab milieu and environment that speaks only Arabic. And they said, well, we're going to instill you there.
Well, this a lot of it, there's, I'll call it the intellectual discordance in all of this. So here we are in the United States that was founded as a revolutionary movement.
Mhm.
We rebelled and rejected British colonialism initially.
Mhm.
And as I've said and report on my website, I had at least 24, I've really identified 28 ancestors who fought in that war. And yet when you go back and look at the history of the time, it was a very small percentage of Americans that actually fought. The majority, the average was like, well, let's stick with the colonial masters.
Mhm.
So you would think that a country founded in that way would have some minimum empathy towards
Exactly.
what the people in Lebanon are experiencing. And that's what's to me so shocking about what's going on today, that there is, from at least the policy standpoint of the U.S. government, zero empathy, zero understanding, that we view it as if, particularly for the Muslims that inhabit Lebanon, that, hey, you have to line up and do what we want you to do. And then we're shocked when they go, we're not doing that. That's not us. So let me ask you, I want to sort of probe beneath the surface, go back to this whole issue of explaining how Hezbollah would fight Daesh. But
Mhm.
first, explain to people what it means that you, as a Muslim woman, what does that
Mhm.
mean to be? Because the general perception in the West is that Muslim women are oppressed. They
I'm not
are
oppressed.
they
Do I
they
look
are.
like somebody oppressed?
Well, no, look. I've met you.
Well,
I,
Larry, you've met me
I,
twice.
yeah, I've met
You
you.
know,
Don't mess with Safar. Miss Zeinab, don't mess with Miss Zeinab. No,
yes,
you're
yes,
you're
yes,
you're
yes.
you're a strong, very independent, intelligent person, and
Thank
you
you.
just happen to be a woman. Okay.
I happen to be like there's something a saying that goes here. Well, you are too smart, but you're a woman.
Yeah.
You are too smart for a
Well,
woman.
look, that's always been the case. Actually, that cuts across religion and cultures. The
Yes,
women usually are the ones controlling the things. They are the ones, they're smart enough sometimes to pretend
if
that
you,
they're not as smart.
yes, yes, yes. But I was never ever during all my life. I was neither oppressed by my family nor oppressed by my colleagues, nor oppressed by anybody whom I came across in life. But it was always your competency, your ethics, your honesty that played a part in making a clear passport to the hearts and mind. If you want to change, you have to talk to the hearts of the people.
Right. Yeah.
If you attempt to let your words be heard, let them hear you from their hearts, through their hearts, and then you can easily get there. This is very important. You have to talk to the hearts. And I hope that I might be able to employ whatever I can in order to get through the hearts and then to the minds. No, women are not oppressed here. The oppression that you're talking about is the one that we were shocked with in a country that boasts about its values and democracy and free speech, with what happened with the university students in
Right.
Columbia, in Harvard, the way, they were attacking the academics and the students and tasering them and dragging them with their shirts and their, the images were very harsh for us to believe that this might happen in the US of A. So, no, if you're talking about oppression, I don't know how a woman would be oppressed. It's domestic violence. Domestic violence is found everywhere in all
Right.
societies
Right.
since the dawn of history. So it's not something that is only, for the women who are veiled or who are raised in a specific environment. I told you I was raised in an evangelical school, but I'm also a devout Muslim.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of it. And I have lots of friends and people that I love from the bottom of my heart who are Muslims, who are Christians, who are Jews, who are Buddhists, who are everything.
But would you explain to the people who are going to be watching this
Yes.
the difference? Do you consider yourself a Sunni Muslim or a Shia Muslim, or does it matter? Or explain why it does sometimes matter in certain circles. I know it's a big, broad question, but you've got a smart mind.
Yeah, I know, but I'd rather not delve into this particular issue. I'm a Muslim, and that's enough for me.
Well,
and there are no wide, vast differences. And anyone who tells you that there are big differences between Muslim Shiites and Muslim Sunnis is just trying to drive a wedge into Islam. There's no such or a big difference.
Right.
It's a school of thought. It's a doctrine. It's something like a school of thought. Let's call it this way. I can't delve into the particulars of this. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of choice. Okay.
Right.
I could be born like that, but it's a matter of choice of what you want to be. And it shouldn't be shared with everyone. Say, well, I'm a Muslim who is a Shiite and I'm a Muslim who is a Sunni. No. It doesn't matter. It's not the
Well,
thing that defines me. I'm a
well,
human being.
yeah.
That's it.
Well, and that's a great point, because sometimes I do try to explain, because
Yes.
the average American, because we're predominantly a Christian nation, or grew up at least within a Christian theology, with Islam being seen as something that involved the Crusades.
Just like the Islamophobia trend. Yes.
Yeah, and so I try to account. I say it's there's Christianity. And within Christianity, you have like the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox Christians. And then then you get the evangelicals, the ones that you've had experience growing up with. Now,
Yes.
if you put those two into the same room, you will find those who will recognize that they are ultimately, at least according to their own theology, supposed to be brothers and sisters, that they worship the same God. But when they get down into some of the particulars of theology and start arguing over those,
Yes.
they are at odds.
Exactly.
And that's one of the I'll call it one of the horrors that grew out of the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 was the rise of ISIS, because I've never really explored sort of what it was that turned it into this version where for the West it becomes the defining image of Islam, which is not fair, it's not true, it's not accurate. And then the highlight that is the fact, as you pointed out, it was Hezbollah that was fighting Daesh because they saw it as being a complete violation of the tenets of Islam.
The same way they used Al-Qaeda, and Hillary Clinton in one of the hearings, she just admitted that, well, we used Al-Qaeda to dismantle the Soviet, and they have ridden this horse. The same thing, they used Daesh in order to tarnish the image of Islam, and at the same time to get rid of all those who stood in the way of the so-called Arab Spring, in toppling the regimes that did not go hand in hand with the ideas of the Americans. So this is how, but Daesh started to slip from their hand and their control. They stopped the money flow. And then what happened? This idea of Muslims decapitating others for the sake of delivering messages and instilling fear in the people, whoever comes across them, this is a very, it has intimidated the people a lot at the beginning. And you can never imagine how much arms they have, how much money they have. And they made this jihad al-nikah, meaning that every man can sleep with whoever woman. They don't care if she's married, if she's divorced, if she's whoever, if she's a virgin, if whatever. And they provided all the means for them. We'll give you everything. Just get rid of Hezbollah. Just get rid of Bashar al-Assad. Just get rid of this and that.
Yeah.
and then they couldn't control it, because when Hezbollah, Hezbollah, when the resistance goes into any equation, it turns around the table and it changes everything. It changes everything.
Yeah.
In Aleppo, it was Hezbollah on the ground and the Russians in the air. And, Aleppo is just a forest of cement. It's so difficult to fight, and, over there, and people hiding in the buildings and coming out of the alleys, and you don't know exactly. You went from Lebanon into Syria to a place perhaps you're not familiar with. You're not a person who belongs to this country, but you were invited by the government to come and help. And this is what happened. Who liberated the Christian villages in the east of Lebanon? Who, those, we know people from these areas, and they said, we never felt safe except when Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance, they came to protect us.
Right.
Because those Daesh people, they wanted to take our women. They
Right.
took those areas are full of orchards, and they have lots of nice, good things and resources over there. They wanted to capture and they wanted to drive the men or kill them. Either you surrender and you say we become Muslims, or we decapitate you. They wanted to take the women. It was Hezbollah who went there, who sacrificed many of our brothers and children, and said that, those are people, our brothers. Some people try to be more Hezbollahis than Hezbollah himself. And they said that, those very people hate you, and they want you to be isolated, to drive you out of the country. They said, we don't care about that. Those are Lebanese, fellow Lebanese, regardless of their religion, regardless of their political party and affiliation. They are our brothers in a nation. They are nationalists to us. So it's our duty to protect them.
Yeah.
Also today, Larry, whatever Hezbollah is doing in the south of the country is not only protecting the Shia, it's also protecting everyone who belongs to the south of the country and to all Lebanon. I told you in the beginning, what's happening? Investments, 400,000 passengers just last month. A lot of things are happening here. I am sitting with you, talking to you. Do I look like a person who is afraid of a raid or a bombardment or whatever? No, because I know that there are people. God is the first and foremost almighty protector, but we know that there are others who are protecting us.
Sure.
And if you might allow me to say something here, that the last speech by Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, it was termed as a speech of strategic deterrence. And also, while the U.S. Special Envoy to Lebanon and to occupied territories, Amos Hochstein, was also on the way going to the occupied territories, Hezbollah sent the Hupu drone, or the Hutu drone, which filmed for 41 minutes very important spots, areas, and with exact coordinates of certain, like the airport, Ben Gurion Airport, and other things. 41 minutes, imagine, and it wasn't spotted. And it came back to Lebanon, and Hezbollah displayed a video of 9 minutes and more about this particular thing. Those two things, Hezbollah Secretary General's speech and the messages that it had, that if you plan any kind of escalation against Lebanon, then we are going to fight you with no restraints, no limits, no rules, meaning no red lines.
Right. No, and that's
this has worked to de-escalate, and it is very important.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I don't think the message is resonating as it should. So that the West the West still sort of harbors this image of Hezbollah as this small group of people, these guys, radical guys wearing green headbands, marching around the streets of Lebanon, shooting rifles off in the air. And I keep trying to explain, I view part of my job, it's not official employment, but my mission is to try to help people. I said, wait, step back and understand what has happened. Hezbollah is, let's call it a government. It's not a military movement. It's not just a social movement. It provides services to orphans. It provides social services to the elderly. It
health services, everything.
It is comprehensive. So it has become something that's very organic and real, and yet at the same time, it has become, I would argue, one of the strongest military organizations with military capabilities in the entire Middle East.
It is rated as one of the 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what, when I listen to these crazy statements coming out of Israel,
Mhm.
and that they're going to invade Lebanon again. We're going to defeat Hezbollah. And I feel a little bit like the prophet Jeremiah trying to warn, no, don't
I
do
believe
it.
that. I believe it's all like, much ado about nothing, like just statements and trying to up the ante, to use a high tone, but they themselves don't believe what is coming out of their mouths. And there is quite a strong reluctance to go to war regarding the fact that Israel is totally exhausted. It's overstretched.
Yeah,
The
I
army
agree.
is totally exhausted after 9 months between the north and the south. In the south, you have Al-Qassam and the Islamic Jihad and whatever. And also in the West Bank,
I
not
was
to
going to say
forget the West Bank.
don't forget the
It's
West
getting
Bank.
more and more into the scene. So there is a kind of indirect Western and American political communications envoys coming to Lebanon. They all indicate in this direction. If the West, spearheaded by the US of A, want Hezbollah not to go to war, it is therefore the responsibility of America to put pressure on Netanyahu, this reckless, criminal creature, not to take any step that would open the gates of hell on him. It will be an Armageddon.
Right. Yeah.
This is very important. And Hezbollah, as I said before, Larry, they are part and parcel of this country. When they talk about driving the Radwan force 4 or 5 kilometers away from the border and going to the UN Resolution 1701, the status quo ante. How can you, or those people, those fighters, they belong to these villages. It is their villages that they are protecting.
Yeah, and it's family. That's what I think.
Family.
Yeah.
So are you telling them that, well, go away and we'll do whatever we because we have an experience with this occupation since 1982. It's not like a matter of, we tried them only once and twice or whatever. This is an occupation who does not belong to the land, who does not understand what humanity is. I told you, Larry, humanity is us, you, me, others, not them.
Well, I think, there's a cultural difference here that I don't think, most Muslims, Lebanese, most people throughout the Middle East do not understand. Mm-hmm. Because you always have a tendency to view the world through your own experience. Mm-hmm. You grow up in an experience of extended families and the obligations to families that are not just to brother and sister and father and mother, but extend to cousins and aunts and uncles and these neighbors, within that neighbors, and these very strong family ties. And I think there's sometimes you'll make the mistake of assuming that has the play, that's what goes on here in the United States. And it's actually not the case. Yes. That the families are much more fragmented. And, I think part of that is a result of this corrupt Western ideology that is trying to infect the rest of the world. Which is one of, I think, the underlying causes people don't want to grasp, that Islam in particular stands as sort of a bulwark, as does Eastern Orthodox Christianity, against this attempt to normalize homosexuality, to encourage that and in fact to attack.
So-called cultural revolution.
Yeah.
What kind of revolution?
Yeah.
They were trying also to impose it here in Lebanon.
Right.
To drive it through the academic scholastic, curriculum. But we are confronting this. And many people here, I'm not talking about Muslims, I'm talking also about all people from all walks of life, from all religions and faiths. It does not look like us, this thing. we don't identify or recognize this, but there are many NGOs that are being used for this particular purpose. The same thing goes also for Iraq.
Yeah, and that's we try, because you're not Palestinian.
I'm not Palestinian, but I'm more Palestinian than Palestinians.
Yeah, that's the point. It is.
Yeah, we have learned from our families and from our colleagues. We have learned what's the meaning. We have a lot of Palestinian brothers and sisters and comrades, and we have learned what's the meaning of being homeless in your own home, Larry.
Yeah.
This is very difficult. You belong to this land, and you don't have any privilege to this land. You don't have any privilege to your olive tree. You don't have any privilege to your orchard. You don't know when you're going to wake up in a detention center or a torture center or with your family or deported out of the country. They are living in horrid conditions. And if you talk about Gaza, well, this is the most awful, horrid condition over there.
Yeah, it's
40,000 people
unimaginable.
So far.
Unimaginable.
Tens of thousands missing, hundreds of thousands injured, children targeted, women targeted. 75% of those who are targeted in Gaza are women and children and the elderly. 83% of people have no access to food. And I talked about this, that some of the children, they spend 2 or 3 days without food. Where on earth is this acceptable?
Yeah, no.
It's a genocide. It's, the Israelis, they started this thing. Okay, Hamas, they started on October 7th. If we go back to the backdrop and the backstory of why did Hamas start this, they are under the conditions of siege, occupation, no resources, siege from the sea, siege from the land. And there's the crossing opens one day and closes hundreds of days. So why would you blame people who take resistance as the only option to liberate themselves?
Yeah.
What did the others do for them? What did the others provide them for? No, in a condition of war, they are even afraid of taking resolutions to help the Gazans or the people in the West Bank. They are even afraid of providing humanitarian medical aid. What kind of country on earth would accept that people target ambulances? People are being targeted. So when they take their fellows by an ambulance to a medical place, they target the hospital and the hospice or the ambulances. This is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Enough is enough. Khalas.
But in fact, we've gotten ourselves into a situation I hesitate to use the term modern people, because while we like to present ourselves as modern, we are barbaric, in that we allow.
Is this modernity?
Yeah, we can live with this massacre of children and of women, and this is something that you're going to help to have on your back throughout history. People will not forget. Those traumatized children are not going to forget losing all their family. Families were crossed and eliminated from the civil records. Have you ever watched the movie Exodus?
Yes.
With Paul Newman and
yes.
So I grew up with, I was born in 1955, and I think that movie came out like 61, 62. And so for people of my generation, that movie was that presented what I call the Zionist meme. And it was comprised of, here are all these Holocaust survivors just looking for freedom to avoid this repression. And it was all these, these nasty Muslims that were trying to, they killed a little blonde girl. But that became sort of a dominant, that's the lens that the most Americans looked at the Middle East through up until now. And I think that's starting to change.
Larry, Hollywood was one of the most important means in the hands of those who are sympathetic or those who are funded by the Zionists in order to let this narrative flourish.
Right.
You know, because when I watch a movie, I come to believe it.
Yeah. No, it's very much.
Especially if I'm not aware or I don't belong geographically to this area or I don't have affiliations. I don't have people who can. That's why when we see a person from the US of A or from far away and they recognize our issues, we say, well, that's excellent. Because they made some effort in order to dig through and try to know the ethos of the people here.
Right.
Their understandings. It's very important, Larry.
Yeah, no, I think that's critical. And that's part of why I wanted to do this interview with you today, to get it out on video, to put it out there. There needs to be a human face, a face that all of a sudden, you're not some abstract. You're not this Muslim, you're Zeinab. And people say, oh, she's got a great smile. And, they're.
I'm wearing the wrong colors today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see.
The Russians are not going to be so happy with me.
You've gone full Ukraine. Actually, you're Ukraine in reverse. Okay, you're upside down Ukraine.
Look, yellow is the color of resistance here in Lebanon.
Oh, okay.
And in the region. So it's the color of the Lebanese resistance. And denim is American. So I'm not totally against the US of A.
But somehow trying to humanize this because, and I think it's important as you draw the distinction between Zionist and Jew, because when you look at some of the most prominent, the most outspoken voices right now against what's happening in Gaza, you see Jews like Jeffrey Sachs and Max Blumenthal and Norman Finkelstein and Aaron
Atzman, all of them.
So
Alison Veer. Yes.
Yeah, so it's so wrong to try to portray this as a battle between Jew and Muslim. It's not. This, in fact, I would argue that the Zionist mentality really has very little to do with Judaism. It dresses up in Judaism, masquerades under that.
This colonial, imperialist, Zionist, expansionist, unipolar colonialism, this is what we are against. That's why you and I were part of this multipolarity issue to try to and say that, well, we have to respect others. We have to respect other cultures, other values, other ways of expressing themselves. We are human beings, and each one has his own set of that distinguishes each state from the other. And state by, I don't mean like a geographical state, but state of everything, all these things that they believe in, all civilizations from the others. We have to respect each other.
Sure. So let me get your assessment of Hawkins' mission, because it looked like his mission to Lebanon was to try to somehow convince the government to crack down on Hezbollah. Again, that's the storyline as it's presented in the West.
Well, I don't think that he wants the government to crack down on Hezbollah because he knows that, well, Hezbollah is more, he said something very important that, he talked to the Qataris and he said to the Qataris, tell Nasrallah to let the Houthis, or no, it's the other way. Tell Nasrallah to stop, to have Hamas stop its operations in the south. And then the Saudis, of course, after they got certain messages, they talked to Bashar al-Assad and they said that, well, tell Nasrallah, Sayyid Nasrallah, that to tell the Houthis or Ansarullah to stop the operations that they are doing in the Red Sea. So Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, is recognized by the Arabs first, by the West, by Hawkins himself, that this this man is strong enough to just, send a message, whether to the Ansarullah or to Hamas, or that he has the power of convincing them to stop. But, Hezbollah said from the very beginning, and they told through mediators, of course, Hawkins and others, we cannot talk about anything, about any guarantees, about any settlements until there is a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. This is very important.
Yeah.
The Israelis, they don't want a permanent ceasefire and then Hezbollah stops the operations. They want to make a settlement so that, they can return to the north even before they can stop the thing in Gaza, their attacks and their aggression in Gaza. So Hawkins' mission is still, the hudhud or the hoopoo. It preceded his visit to the occupied territories. So it was also a clear message to Hawkins that, look, we have the power to show you the targets that it would be in the line of our fire in case things roll into an all-out blown-up war between Lebanon and the occupied territories and Israel, of course.
Yeah, well, I sadly, I think that's where we're headed. I think Israel has committed itself. I call it, in a way, if there's a silver lining to this, that if Israel does this, it will sow the seeds of Israel's own destruction. It will actually, it may actually bring an end to the Zionist madness. Let me, we're coming up on an hour, and I don't want to take any more of your valuable time. But we could continue this for a long time. We'll do it again.
Yes.
But try to explain, so I'll have mostly Americans. I do have a great international audience. But try to explain to Americans how you folks see, Joe Biden and his government. Because I don't think most Americans appreciate how people in your position look back at the United States and go, what the hell's going on there?
Look, particularly now, Larry, the American administration, and particularly that you are just on the threshold of the elections, the presidential elections, they don't want an escalation and a war. It's not in their favor. They don't want to be dragged into an all-out war because, Sayyid Nasrallah, in his recent speech, he talked and he delivered a warning to Cyprus.
Right.
Which is an island that is 264 kilometers away from Lebanon, but which harbors also British bases.
Right.
So if it's going to, it's also a message to Britain. It's a message to the US of A. All the assets of the Americans inside Lebanon might be under fire. So how are they going to get entangled into a thing that they don't need it now because they have elections? And the recent, shocking, it's not shocking, however, but it was cartoonist. It wasn't good. It was horrible debate between Biden and Trump. It does not play in the favor of President Biden. President Biden has to go home. President Biden has to rest. I don't know what's wrong with his family, with his friends, with those who counsel him, those who... I'm in no place to criticize the president of another country. But what we've seen during the debate, Trump is not any better, by the way. And it's very bad that when a country as big as the US of A, they have only those two people to represent them.
Yeah.
You have young people. You have young and competent people who can change the face, who can fix everything, who can, bring a new blood into the country. Why focus on... Trump is extreme in a certain dimension and Biden is extreme and yet now unaware of what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's not in the favor of the country at the beginning and at the end.
About 20 years ago, when I was involved with a training program for the U.S. State Department, anti-terrorism training assistance program, and we'd bring people from, we had we'd bring the top security officials from the police and government officials, say from Lebanon and from Turkey and from Cyprus and from Saudi Arabia, from, around the world. And I found, and this was right in 2003, right after the United States had invaded Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking to these different people, I was struck by one thing that I found, regardless of whether they were from, whether they're from South America, Middle East, or Asia, they all assumed that the United States had some sort of secret plan that we were working on that we weren't telling them about. That whatever our open policy was and statements were, they assumed, oh, those Americans are lying. They've got really some secret plan. And when I had to tell them, I say, no, we're actually that stupid. We have no idea what we're doing. And they'd look at me like, I had landed from another planet. Is that, I guess what I'm asking is, do you all share sort of that same view that perhaps the United States has some secret elaborate plan that it's working on to, remake the world, or that we're actually just sort of stumbling into one?
There is no time for the US of A to remake the world. They should join in as being part of the multipolar world. We don't need them to remake the world. We don't need them to loot the resources of the world, of our world. Why are they still in Iraq with the biggest embassy ever?
Right.
What are they doing in Iraq after how many years? Almost 20 years?
21, going on 21 years now.
What have they achieved so far?
Yeah.
They attempted to change, to make Iraq democratic, to change the culture of the Iraqis with 400,000 NGOs trying to instill and plant this kind of cultural revolution inside a country that they don't even understand.
Yeah.
They don't even understand. And the same thing they did in Lebanon, they wanted to do. They are still in the eastern part of Syria, where the oil is. They don't want to leave.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're living through that Chinese curse of interesting times. Listen, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. But knowing you are a generous, kind, and intelligent person. And I thank you so much for just being willing to share your thoughts today. I think that this video is going to actually resonate some ways. It may end up going viral. People go, hey, I like listening to her.
Yeah, thank you.